Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. Now it's become fashionable to bash modern BMWs. And to be fair, that's been made immeasurably easier by this generation of BMWs because they were so much better than everything else at the time. The E39 in particular was head and shoulders above all its competitors. BMW will never be able to do this again, and the reasons for that might surprise you. Let's take it out. I'll tell you what makes them so good and why it is impossible today for BMW to repeat this trick again. Let's talk a little bit about this car. This is a 535. Jamie brought it down and it's a really well used example, 210,000 miles. I really like that. It's got patina, signs of wear, but that's fine. It's a car that can be used. He uses it as his daily. It's an auto, which again, the purists may sniff at, but the vast majority of the V8s like this, they were autos, and for good reason. It suits the car's character. So it's nippy, 0 to 60 was 7 seconds. I think 154 miles an hour top speed. It's not really what it's about. For a car of this size and this weight, it really does, the compromise between the ride and the handling is pretty special. It's so well controlled and yet it rides so well. And one thing is, the steering, although it's the right sort of speed, the weighing isn't bad. Like a lot of BMW systems, it doesn't give a massive amount of feedback, but it's better on this than some of the other BMWs that I've driven. The gearbox was a 5-speed. At the time, it was pretty much cutting edge. As you've seen here, you can override it and change gears yourself, and it is just about acceptable. If you compare it to modern systems, it feels very, very dim-witted, but I think for everyday driving, it's absolutely fine. And you don't get that kick in the guts when you change gear because obviously it's just the torque converter changing, but it gives you a little bit, it gives you enough control that you can have fun with it. Now, I believe this has had an engine rebuild. It certainly sounds very, very fit. A lot of people say that perhaps the straight sixes are the better cars. They're obviously a little bit more economical. If you go 528, 530, the difference in performance isn't that large, and they still sound great. They have their own peculiar character and sound. And they're sort of a bit cheaper to run. But I have to say, the V8 does have, if you like, I guess it comes down to what you want and the sound. One other thing though is, I'm pretty sure that the straight sixes and the fours, I think there's only one four, which was a diesel, but the straight sixes do have rack and pinion steering. I would imagine that they put the recirculating ball steering on these because there was maybe a lack of space with the larger engines. But I think that the other steering system is probably a little bit sharper. Now this is a 535, but when the 525 was first tested, it beat all its competitors. That was in 1995. Now it beat them in every conceivable area. It was more comfortable, it handled better, the interior was better quality, it was better built. So it was really an absolute trouncing by BMW of all the competition. Now the incredible thing is that not only did these cars actually beat the competitors when they came out, but they also beat the cars that replaced them. So for example, when it came out, beat the Saab 900. When the 925 came out, I think that was in 97, it also beat that. The new A6 in 2000, still not as good as the 5 Series. The same with the Mercedes E-Class. The Alpha 166 should have been a competitor for this, a sort of sporty, big Luxo saloon. And although the 166 was an improvement over previous cars, the quality was better than previous big Alphas, actually drove pretty well. It's quite a sprightly drive, although it isn't rear-wheel drive, so if you really push it, then it falls apart a little bit more. You just get an understeery wash, which you don't as much with these. But the big problem was quality still wasn't good enough. Also, it had some quite idiosyncratic looks, whereas these just look so right. I mean, this is definitely peak BMW design. I think, you know, the E46, what BMW was making at the time was just so good. Now, part of the problem is that when this was replaced, the car that followed it, the E60, although it was a definite improvement in some areas where this wasn't really deficient anyway, again, like it handled even better, for example, but the design, the interiors, the quality just isn't there. They're not reliable. The interiors don't wear as well. They don't have the same feeling of quality as the E39. All the buttons in this car, they're just beautifully damped. It's a very complete car, and just to give you an idea of how dominant and how successful it was, let me just give you some stats. In the 9 years that it was produced, the E39 managed to sell almost 1.5 million units. Saab, with the two models that were competing against the 5 Series, so that's the 9000, which came out in 1984. And then the 925, which I think came out in 1997 and was produced till 2012. So that is a space of 28 years of production with two models, as against one car in 9 years. Saab didn't even manage 1 million units in that time. But what makes this so good, and why can it never, I think, be repeated? It is the all-round brilliance of this. I mentioned before the interior is incredibly well built, perfect ergonomically. Just look at those clocks. They are simply a paragon of clarity. It is just about anyone, I think, can get a decent driving position in this. I certainly can. It just supports you in all the right places. Everything is within reach. A perfect mile muncher. But for quite a big car, it also handles really well, and that's because most of the suspension components for the first time were made out of aluminium. And at the back, this was the first 5 Series which had a multi-link rear setup instead of the previous trailing arms. So it keeps the geometry of the rear wheels quite stable over bumps, making the car handle better, more consistently. So why is it that I'm saying that BMW can't do this again today? They can't make a car which is all round so perfect. If you look at what they're making now, they are just, I don't know, the designs in particular. So they're hampered by two things. Firstly, modern cars just aren't as involving as the older cars. It's very difficult to make them so involving because most people want to be removed from the car driving experience. So they're very refined, they're very easy to drive, but they don't give you much feedback. They're not fun. That's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is in the design. Look at modern BMWs, and they, to my eyes, and I think to most people I've spoken to, they are absolutely hideous. Now, BMW isn't a stupid company. Why are they doing this? Well, it's because they're now responding to some very large new markets like China and India. Their taste in cars is perhaps somewhat different to ours. So whereas when BMW was making this, it could afford to concentrate on what people perhaps in Europe and in the US wanted, now they have to look at what world demand is. That means that the design is compromised, and getting something that, at least to our eyes, looks truly pretty but well balanced seems to be quite difficult to achieve. for me, these years are definitely peak BMW. It was a time when they produced some incredible cars. They were well made, they handled well, they feel like quality items, and they're so well rounded in every single area. Something I don't believe they're able to emulate today. So this is definitely an upcoming classic if it's not a classic already. I know everyone goes absolutely bananas about the M5. Personally, I think with cars like this, the M5 is a really comfortable car anyway, but they're never going to be truly accomplished sports cars. The M5 is a brilliant compromise, but it's still a compromise because it is still a big, heavy car. I think you're probably better off with one of the standard cars, and then you can use it as was intended, a big, comfortable luxury car. In that case, you're looking, I mean, they start around sort of 2000, something like that. They're cars that will definitely need work. You can get something that's usable and not bad for about 5,000, maybe Minters for around 10,000. The V8, very hard to get manuals, so you're probably going to be looking at an auto. The V6s, the straight sixes you can find in manual, but even then, there's a significant sort of upshift in price for those. Thank you all so much for watching. It is massively appreciated. If you haven't already, please do subscribe because it really helps the channel, and I look forward to seeing you for the next video.